It seems that a majority of the votes for what to post next went to how I personally think Resident Evil Village should have gone or ended. So, here we are. Mandatory disclaimer. These are just my own views on it. You're allowed to disagree or add your own opinions, but please be respectful. Anyways, I have actually talked about this before, and I tend to get really dumb comments whenever I bring it up. Let me go ahead and say that I do like Ethan, but I personally preferred him when he was just some guy in Biohazard as opposed to who he was in Village. Now, my main irritation with Village was a mix of the promotional content and the way the lords were laid out. And while I do love the Dimitrescus and the other lords, I fully understand they were the villains and would have died regardless if Ethan was there to do it. That being said, let's fully get into my main annoyance. I highly dislike that the Dimitrescus were the first bosses we encountered, and I also dislike how short their section was, as well as how less detailed the other lords' sections were in comparison. Personally speaking, I would have much preferred we faced Donna first, as she seems to be the weakest lord, likely because of her heavy mental illness, then progress to Moreau, who is a bit stronger than Donna but not as much as the other two. I understand that the Dimitrescus were mostly just used as a selling point for the game, but I've also heard that plenty of people stopped playing when they were killed extremely early on. I mean, you buy a game specifically for 1-4 characters and expect them to have a much bigger role, only for them to be the first bosses you encounter. Yeah, I can see why people stopped playing there. I had also hoped Miranda would have a bigger role in the game than she did. While she is the puppeteer and the reason literally anything happened in Biohazard and Village, she felt a bit two-dimensional at times, without really digging in deeper to her backstory and why she acted the way she did, without seeing all the hell she's caused and the things she's been through. She just seems like some woman trying to play God to get her daughter back, which, I guess she was, in a way, but she's also so much more than that. I dislike when I play games and hardly anything is revealed about the characters and antagonists within. Like, as much as I enjoy doing my research and finding out more, a lot of what we know about the lords and Miranda is simple speculation, and I hate that. Their personalities and backstories were barely touched. We barely know anything about what they've been through or who the lords were before they were taken under Miranda's wing. I will toot my own horn a little here, but I like to think I'm a pretty decent writer most of the time. Here's how I would have gone about what happened in Village. First, I would have made Donna the first lord we encountered. I did like her section and don't have many annoyances with it. The main thing is that I wish her abilities were a little expanded on. This could have been done either through some more hallucinations or maybe seeing her flickering in the corner of Ethan's vision or in a shadowy bit of her home, only to be gone when you'd look at her fully. Like, because of her severe mental illness, we can assume she likely doesn't have complete control over her abilities. That would cause issues when she's trying to hide from Ethan but remain nearby to continue making him hallucinate. Maybe reality breaks through while traversing through her estate. Or perhaps the hallucinations take a darker turn, and Ethan would see or hear more sinister things that aren't actually there. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Surprisingly, I would actually keep the fetus in her basement simply for its metaphor. It seems to not actually be a real thing, as far as I know, and instead serves as a representation of Ethan's mental state and his fears, in a way. Falling victim to the giant fetus monster seems to mean that he has fallen victim to the insanity he has to endure in her home, and escaping means he has broken free of her hallucination. So, I'd keep that. I would also still keep Donna dying, as it seems pretty obvious she still follows Miranda's orders, despite maybe not wanting to. She can't let Ethan leave, and she will do what she can to ensure that. In turn, that means she would be killed for trying to stop him and getting in his way. I can believe her death, considering she's weaker and severely mentally ill, but I don't think she would have gone down as easily as we saw in game. It would have been a cool fight sequence and maybe we would have seen her mutation, or just a bit of it. After taking care of Donna and giving her more eerie voice lines like she deserved, I would have had a little intersection between her estate and Moreau's watermill, like we see in game. Here, we as the players would learn more about the village and what's going on. Please note that I genuinely would have kept more people alive in the village. You mean to tell me these people have been living with lichens for decades, and no one's ever figured out how to counter them? Likely story. Anyways, everyone would have to die in the end anyway. But I would have a few villagers maybe help Ethan in between the Lord sections, probably less and less people alive each time he comes back. Maybe they would explain more about the lords and what they know of them, as well as the village's history, helping him further understand how to even take them down and get his daughter back. Because, listen, it really does not make sense for Ethan to know jack shit about the lords but roll up and kill them that easily. They're all powerful in their own ways, much more than he is, and Capcom, please. Moving on. So, we'll assume Ethan now knows something fishy is going on in Moreau's watermill, and maybe someone hints toward him being unstable and desperate for Miranda's praise? Because there's no way no one in the village knew he had mommy issues. It's all he talks about. I don't entirely remember Moreau's part of the story because it was my least favorite section, but I believe most of it was pretty okay. You run around and try to lift a dam to get further into the village, only to be stopped by a certain fishy boy now trying to kill you. While I would have kept most of his section the same, I definitely would have added more information on him and his territory, or more hints as to what's happening and his role in it. Like, why aren't his experiments fishy mutants? I would have shit myself. Why are they just lichens? Why do we literally never see him in his section until he's ready to fight? Moreau is the one lord I can understand the mutation to and being able to defeat him. Kinda. I do think it would be incredibly difficult and time-consuming to kill a giant mommy issue-having, cheese and romance novel-loving fish boy, but I can see it happening. Like, he is a bit slow, considering he's literally a fish out of water and can only move forward with his arms, and I can see Ethan getting quite a few hits off of him this way. That's being generous, and it would make even more sense if Ethan knew how to run for his life instead of pretending he's just out for a light jog when there's a massive, mutated monster chasing him down. Anyways. So, we take down Moreau, come out with some injuries, and we find less villagers. We explain what's happened so far, find notes about life in the village, how distraught these people are that Miranda has abandoned them. Perhaps Ethan finds Duke again after receiving 2 of his daughter's flasks and has the other 2 lords explain to him. Duke would inform him of the rampaging tyrant that is Lady Dimitrescus and her magnetic brother, Lord Heisenberg. Assuming he knows a bit more about all the lords in general, maybe he's the one that provides Ethan with more information on how to take them down or at least get through them. It's not like Duke even really seems to care about the lords or Miranda's plight. He just seems to care about the trade and getting more money or selling things, so why wouldn't he sell some information to Ethan? And maybe that could be a plot point. You have to buy some stuff from Duke for him to even admit some weaknesses of the lords, even if they may be a little misleading at times, or vague enough they could be taken the wrong way. For example, buying information on Donna would mean Ethan is better at deflecting her hallucinations or can break out of them easier, realizing what he's seeing isn't real. He wouldn't see things on the edge of his vision and maybe would have an easier time getting through the basement and estate in general. However, skipping that would mean Donna's section becomes a lot scarier and much harder to progress through, and the player may become lost easily when a corridor stretches farther than it should or a door is no longer there when they turn around. Her section had so much potential to be even freakier than it was, and it's such a missed opportunity. But does that make sense? There are little things the Duke could sell to make it a bit easier to get through each Lord section and add more lore to the game you may not know otherwise. And if you skip the information buying, you're left in the dark on several accounts. The game would be much more difficult, no matter how many times you've played it. This would also probably bring people back for a second round to get 2 different playthroughs depending on the choices you make with Duke and the villagers. Anyways, let's move on. I'm getting too into this. The third lord we face would be Lady Dimitrescu, and be warned of my very likely rant on the subject. There are a lot of things I would change about the Dimitrescu section, despite my love for it. For starters, I probably would have added more blood and death in the castle to really add on to how in danger Ethan is. But also considering all the staff that was just killed, and have body parts or just dead bodies littering the floors, messily cleaned up. I would have also made the castle darker, perhaps with a note hinting that the girls hunt better in the dark, or that they have more fun doing so, and Ethan is their prey, and the castle would be a little longer than it was, between a mix of longer puzzles and more cutscenes or dialogue between the family. I also would have loved if each lord had more cutscenes in general, especially Moreau and Donna. This wasn't limited just to the Dimitrescus. Anyways, I feel their relationships with each other were surface deep and could have been expanded upon easily, especially considering how many people misinterpreted their characters based on what we were given. Just imagine how eerie the castle would have been had Capcom gone down a horror route. You emerge from the swampland that is Lord Moreau's territory, warned of a castle full of blood and death but not expecting anything too horrible, only to be met with dark corridors, distant fly buzzing, and faint cackling from the daughters. It does make sense to not see Lady Dimitrescu until one of her daughters has died, considering she entrusted Ethan's capture to them and assumed they would have taken care of him with ease. If they were allowed to just be themselves and weren't restrained by dumb plot, they would have had him easily. I feel that Daniela actually should have been the first to die, as much as I love her, or that there should have been a bit of a choice, like with how you can choose whether to go after her or Cassandra first. She's a lot weaker and doesn't take the situation as seriously, so that would have made sense, even if she was locked up in the library. If Daniela was not killed first, it would have been better to see her sometime before one of her sisters are killed. At this point, Lady Dimitrescu would have no reason to assume she couldn't handle herself against a simple man-thing, and getting a hunting scene chasing him down would have been cool. It's obvious they would have their own specialties when hunting prey together, perhaps with Bella leading the chase, Daniela taunting him and pretending she means him no harm, and Cassandra popping out of nowhere to scare him into a certain direction. I would also change the way their weaknesses were set in place. I think it's a silly weakness to have anyway, and I highly doubt any of the girls would have willingly gone somewhere they could be exposed to the cold outside when there's an intruder with guns. Despite their individual immaturities, at times, they're all pretty smart, so it wouldn't make sense for them to corner themselves somewhere they know their weakness can be exploited. But let's say Ethan does manage to find a way to weaken them. What then? They've been hunting humans and other beasts for over 60 years, and you expect me to believe they were taken down that easily? They would have clapped his ass in seconds upon being weakened after the shock of such an action had settled. And if you think otherwise, please kindly argue with the wall. Let's also assume Ethan does manage to kill one daughter, just for the sake of this argument. Lady Dimitrescu very obviously loves her daughters more than anything, and I think it would have made the game that much scarier to be hunted by a rampaging mother searching for revenge for her lost daughter. We see her as this calm, collected, kind of civil noblewoman, and as soon as a daughter is dead, all of her nobleness is thrown right out the window for the sake of vengeance. Yeah, I probably would have cried, hearing her chase me down a darkened hallway, only being able to listen to her taunts and heels clicking on the floor. You'd have to be smart and strategize how to hide from her, and maybe we could have had some scenes of her entering rooms Ethan is hiding in, knowing exactly where he is, and only ambushing him after he's left the room. Like, she's a smart lady, and she's a loving mother. If she was allowed to be the character she was made to be and was not held back by plot, she would have decimated him. It's clear she no longer cares for Miranda's ceremony and instead wants to avenge her daughter. So what was stopping her? I also probably would have made Lady Dimitrescu a little weaker than what was shown in game. Like Donna and Moreau. I can understand coming out alive, but not unscathed. But to come away from her dragon form without a single injury? Nah, I don't believe it and I don't like it. Before anyone tries to say Ethan was just stronger, I urge you to actually be quiet. The literal only reason he won was because of plot. That's it. Killing off the Dimitrescus and Heisenberg literally did not make sense with what we were given and the incredibly strong mutations we saw. Anyways, somehow, someway, we'll just say Ethan escapes from the castle rather than kills the Dimitrescus because it didn't make a lot of sense to defeat them. He finds his daughter's flask, escapes out a window or something, and manages to make his way back to the village. I definitely would have made this game scarier than it was, and I'll get to Miranda's part and her own creepiness after I talk about Heisenberg. So, Ethan now finds his way to the factory, and the villagers that had been helping him are all dead now. Maybe he hears faint laughing and buzzing, hinting the Dimitrescus are still alive and the ones who took the remaining villagers, and he runs in the opposite direction. Heisenberg still leads him to the factory, helps him get there pretty easily. He still gives Ethan his plan, but perhaps a little less unhinged than he originally did. I mean, I fully understand why he didn't take the plan. The man has no class and fully admitted to wanting to use or kill his daughter just to take Miranda down. I also feel like working with Heisenberg could have gone well enough until it was revealed what he actually wanted to do with Rose and what the full details of his plan involved, probably through a note that can be found. The betrayal of thinking you can finally trust someone to not be a part of this insane cult, only for them to openly admit they just want to use your daughter and probably kill you after? Ouch. The angst. It hurts so good. Angst. Why does she say it like that? Anyways, this would then be where Heisenberg sends Ethan into the depths of his factory and forces him to use his wits to battle through experiments and other puzzles within, maybe taking the flasks of Rose before he does. That would give him more motivation to get his ass through the castle and save his daughter once more before she's used as a bioweapon to take Miranda down. The main thing I would change about Heisenberg's mutated boss fight is the way it ended. I did like the whole tank fighting a massive metal man thing, but once the tank was out of the picture, it seemed very unrealistic. And I'm a sucker for actual realism in media rather than OP characters who win just because they can. Like, Ethan's struggle was really lacking in the second half of the battle, and Heisenberg would have sliced him up easily with his speed and several saw attachments on his mutated body. So, considering how slow Ethan runs, it wouldn't make sense for him to outrun a mutated Heisenberg. But this is where my eeriness with Miranda comes in. I feel she should have been the one to end Heisenberg, perhaps with the mold. She's certainly powerful enough, and it would have ensured he died rather than expecting Ethan to kill him, just as he did not kill the Dimitrescus. Remember that this is based off of what I've said so far, not what was in canon. Of course, we know Miranda likely took things into her own hands with killing off the Dimitrescus, just as she did with Heisenberg, considering she needed lots of dead bodies for the ceremony of Ava's resurrection to be successful. In all honesty, I would keep the rest of what happened with Miranda and the ending. I do think Ethan's sacrifice was a good and fitting end for him, and he wouldn't have made it far with Miranda crumbling to the ground and the mold becoming ash around him. Someone had to make sure the Megamycete was no more, and it was fitting that he try and secure a future for his wife and daughter. The main thing I would change about Miranda was to give her more time in game. She was the main villain, and it felt like we literally saw her less than the other lords. To combat that, I would keep her scenes as the hag, which do help push Ethan in the right direction and do her bidding as she fools him into thinking she means well and is looking out for him. However, I do think it would have been interesting to see her around the village or the Lord's territories, perhaps because she's trying to ensure everything is going to plan. It would be how she knows the Dimitrescus are still alive, and how she would know to take care of them, and how she would know where exactly Ethan is along his journey to continue pushing him to do her dirty work for her. This could be implemented by Ethan seeing her amidst the darkness, her golden mask glinting against torch or candlelight, laughing when he noticed her nearby and disappearing. This would happen on several occasions, maybe even with her taunting him and leading him to kill her false children for her, or at least the ones he can. I mean, she seems to have some sort of teleportation ability with her control over the mold, seeing how she literally appears out of the ground as mold to take Ethan's heart out. She can also form her body into crows to get away, so it wouldn't be too wild to assume she can just appear wherever mold is, probably all around the village, to track his progress. This could also offer up some scenes where Ethan is wandering somewhere and feels someone watching him, yet he can see no one. Maybe he sees feathers littering the ground or mold moving where Miranda just was, but she's not there anymore. With all her abilities, she would have been really cool as a stalker-type enemy, following Ethan throughout the game, tracking his progress, her regular form taunting him and her hag form gently misguiding him. He'd have no idea this was her until the big reveal and would have no real reason to doubt the hag's motives, especially if the villagers spoke of her devotion to the people rather than to Miranda. Wouldn't that make a bit more sense? She'd be leading him where she wanted using two different forms, and with how smart she is, I could see her doing this. Anyways, again, the main aspect I disliked about the game was just that there was a massive lack of information throughout it. Something I would add on to buy more notes, lines from villagers, or likes from Duke, and some of the layouts didn't make sense. I still love the game and have replayed it. I don't know how many times by now, but I feel some of these would have made the game that much better. Of course, the other main aspect of my displeasure for the game's events was the lack of scary content, but I do understand why they toned it down. Still, when you go from playing Biohazard, a really good horror game, to Village, which is more action-packed, it's strange. And there was definitely a lot of missed opportunity with many aspects of characters, designs, etc. If I didn't mention anything specific, assume I either forgot about it because I haven't played the full game in months or that I would have kept it the same. You're more than welcome to disagree or add your own opinions to how you would have changed the game, as these are just my own ideas and what I would have done, based on my knowledge of storytelling and horror. This definitely isn't as detailed as it might have been if I'd actually replayed the game before typing this up, but maybe I'll get back to it one day after I've freshly played it and can remember every minuscule detail. Anyways, I think that's all I have for the moment. Again, these are just my personal opinions, and I do still love the game and would replay it in a heartbeat when I have the time. Maybe soon, if that's something y'all would want to see. I hope you're all staying safe and happy in these trying times. Please remember to drink plenty of water and eat lots of yummy food, and thank you so much for watching.